Sold to the Alpha King. Chapter 14. Alara stood in the courtyard, her fingers trembling around the sinister rune artifact that had just been delivered. A hush fell over the onlookers as she held the object, unable to peel her gaze away from the twisted inscriptions etched into its surface. The firelight from the torches flickered across her knuckles, highlighting the detail of each rune. Ezra stood close beside her, his heartbeat pounding through their mate bond, his concern radiating across every nerve she possessed. She had felt the messenger's arrival moments before through a burst of dread, and now the dreadful artifact itself seemed to pulse with silent menace. Its feel under her fingertips was icy, as though it were draining warmth from the very air around them. She opened her mouth to speak, to call for Damien and Lucas to secure the area, but words died on her lips as a wave of power slammed into her consciousness. The courtyard vanished behind her eyes, replaced by a vivid tapestry of shadows. She saw a cloaked figure standing over a massive table, scattered with fortress maps, each pinned with dark shards that glowed whenever the figure's hand passed above them. In the vision, she heard the low murmur of arcane chanting, felt the clammy press of an unseen presence. The figure's face was obscured, nothing more than a void beneath a hood, yet she sensed a searing intelligence and cold intent. Abruptly, her name flared across a parchment in sharp, blood-red lettering. Alara, as though spelled out by an invisible hand. The name pulsed once, then the image fragmented, replaced by a quick succession of scenes. Fortress walls crumbling under magical blasts, cowering warriors, and flickers of her own face twisted with fear. She let out a choked gasp, staggering. The courtyard returned around her in a swirl of light, the runes and shadows fading from her vision. Her legs buckled, and she might have fallen if Ezra hadn't seized her by the waist and cradled her gently against his chest. There was a chorus of alarmed voices. Damien rushed forward, Lucas close behind, and even some of the elders who had been observing from a distance hurried over. Alara pressed a hand to her forehead, blinking rapidly. Her body trembled with the residue of raw magic that had barreled through her mind. "What is it?" Ezra asked in an urgent, low voice. "Did you see something else?" She took a slow breath, leaning heavily into him. "Yes," she whispered, voice unsteady. A figure cloaked in darkness, maps of the fortress marked with glowing shards, and my name written in red, shining like it was conjured by some vile sorcery. She swallowed, cold dread knotting her stomach. They plan to tear down everything if they can find a way. Ezra's jaw tightened, amber eyes flicking across her face to check if she was stable. "Damien? Lucas?" he said, voice clipped with tension. "Double the patrols. Search the fortress thoroughly. Check every gate, every servant's entrance, every storehouse. No one gets in or out without my direct permission." Damien nodded, his expression grim. "At once, Alpha. We'll tighten security. Lucas, gather the squads." Without further delay, the two men pivoted and sprinted off to carry out the orders, quickly summoning warriors from around the courtyard. Alara steadied her breath. She felt the bond's warmth through her link with Ezra, helping center her. The watchers in the courtyard lingered, uncertain. Some had glimpsed the malicious glint of the artifact. An elder stepped forward, mouth opening as if to question, but Ezra shot him a look that said now was not the time. Gently, he guided Alara away from the crowd, shielding her from the press of curious stares. They headed inside through a narrow corridor, up a winding flight of steps that led to a small antechamber near the library. There, Eamon was waiting, having sensed the abrupt surge of magic from across the fortress. He rose from a wooden chair, his walking stick resting against a shelf of scrolls. His eyes flicked to the rune in Alara's hand, and tension creased his brow. "I felt that from here," Eamon said quietly, stepping forward. He cast a concerned glance at Alara, then at Ezra. "Tell me what happened." Ezra closed the door behind them, ensuring privacy. "A messenger delivered another artifact," he said, voice taut, Alara had a vision. Worse than before. She almost collapsed. Alara nodded, lifting the twisted rune so Eamon could see. It struck me with a vision of someone orchestrating attacks. My name was written on their parchment like I'm their key target. Eamon's expression hardened. Let me see it. He held out his hand. Alara hesitated, then slowly extended the artifact. Eamon grabbed a thick cloth from the desk, using it to take the rune from her without direct contact. He placed it atop a circular metal tray that lay on a low table, leaning in to study the inscriptions. We must be cautious, he said. Direct exposure to malicious runes can drain your energy or open your mind to further intrusion. Ezra slipped an arm around Alara's waist. It's strong, he said. She almost blacked out. Can you determine anything about its nature? Eamon retrieved a small crystal from his pocket, a focusing tool. He hovered it over the rune, murmuring something under his breath. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, a subtle shift in the pressure around them. A faint glow emanated from the rune, responding as though reluctant to reveal itself. Alara felt a distant echo of magic prickle her skin, resonating with the part of her that thrummed with Asena's presence. This is the same style as the shards we identified earlier, Eamon said, his voice laced with urgency. They're formed to attune to a specific magical signature, namely, Alara's, but this one is more potent, meant to transmit illusions or mental attacks directly. It's no mere tracer. Alara squared her shoulders, exhaustion warring with determination. I can't let them keep pushing me around. This device, I need to know how to disarm it or block it. She recalled the chilling figure from her vision, the emptiness beneath that hood, the arcane chanting. The memory made her skin crawl. Eamon met her gaze with quiet resolve. Together we might learn more, he said gently. Channel a little of your magic into it, carefully. I'll anchor the energy. But be certain you're prepared for what it might show us. She exchanged a glance with Ezra, who pressed a reassuring hand to her back. She nodded. All right, let's do it. Eamon motioned for her to hold her hands over the rune, without touching it, while he placed one palm on the table near the artifact. He whispered a caution to Ezra to keep his distance, in case the device lashed out. Alara closed her eyes, inhaling. She felt Asena stir, the familiar swirl of half-wolf awareness guiding her. Gently, she funneled a trickle of her magic forward, letting it brush the edges of the rune's aura. At first, the rune remained unresponsive. Then it flared, sending up faint spirals of dark light, dancing like smoke in a beam of moonlight. A jolt of revelation poured into Alara's mind, a rush of images and words colliding. She gasped, forging through the confusion, and glimpsed the darker motive behind the runes. To weaken her bond with Ezra by sowing fear, to track her magic and ultimately isolate her from the fortress's protective synergy. She felt the heavy weight of malevolence directed at their union, as though the enemy recognized that Alara and Ezra's combined strength posed the greatest obstacle to total domination. At Eamon's side, a small barrier shield glowed pale green, containing the worst of the artifact's magical backlash. After several intense heartbeats, Alara withdrew her power. The runes dimmed, returning to a dormant state. She staggered, and Ezra was there in an instant, steadying her. She found her voice ragged. They're trying to sever the mate bond. It's all part of a bigger plan. They believe if we're disconnected, the fortress can be overrun. Ezra's eyes darkened, his grip on her arm unwavering. Then they'll fail, he said firmly. This only makes me more determined to stand with you. Eamon exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. These runes are fueled by advanced sorcery. Whoever is behind this is no ordinary caster. If they succeed in severing your bond, your powers could be turned against us, or at the least, you'd be significantly weakened. Easy prey. Alara breathed against the sudden rush of anxiety. They want to stop me from defending the fortress, to turn me into a liability. She shivered at the notion. Ezra drew her close, jaw clenched with anger. "We won't let that happen," he said, voice echoing in the small chamber. "I swear it." Eamon wrapped the rune in wards, a protective script he traced on the cloth, then looked up. "We must act quickly. I suspect this is just one move in a larger game." He glanced to Ezra. "You and Alara should inform the council. The fortress must be rallied." Alara nodded, letting Ezra lead her away. Her mind buzzed, worry mixing with a fierce resolve. The attempt to sabotage her bond with Ezra only solidified her determination to master her magic, to stand as an equal partner in protecting their home. They left the antechamber, crossing long corridors until they entered the Great Hall. Damien and Lucas had already begun summoning the elders and key warriors, clearing the space for an urgent council. Alara's pulse raced as she stepped onto the dais at the hall's front, flanked by Ezra. Torches blazed overhead, lending the room a stark brightness. The elders arrived in clusters, some looking alarmed, others steeling themselves for another crisis meeting. The fortress's top warriors and Eamon joined them, forming a semicircle of anxious faces. Ezra raised a hand for silence. When the murmurs died down, he began in a calm but commanding tone. "We have new information regarding the enemy who threatens this fortress. Another artifact, more powerful than the ones we've seen, was delivered tonight. We believe it's designed to weaken Alara's bond with me, an attempt to unravel the strength that protects our home." A low ripple of consternation swept the assembled. One elder, a tall man with white-streaked hair, frowned. "Weakening the mate bond? Such magic is rumored, but I never believed we'd see it used here. Do we know who is behind this or why they focus on Alara?" Alara cleared her throat, feeling Ezra's supportive presence. "I'm still learning about these artifacts, but from what we've uncovered, the enemy sees my magic and our mate bond as the fortress's keystone. If they can shatter that, they think the rest of you will fall quickly." She paused, recalling the wave of dread she'd experienced in the vision. "We suspect it's a sorcerer or group of sorcerers with extensive knowledge of runic magic. This is no casual threat." A murmur of unease moved through the crowd. Some elders exchanged wary looks. Others stared intently at Alara, as though measuring her every word. One elder, older and gaunt, spoke up, his voice hesitant. "Forgive me, but relying heavily on Alara's gifts, are we not placing ourselves at risk if the enemy is specifically targeting her abilities?" Ezra's expression hardened protectively. "If not for Alara, we'd have been caught off guard countless times. She's our best defense against magical infiltration. We stand by her power. Questioning it only serves the enemy's aims." The elder shifted uncomfortably but nodded his concession. Another elder, a woman with keen gray eyes, stepped forward. "We should trust her then. In fact, we must. I, for one, am grateful to see her stepping into her role so ably." Alara smiled gratefully, though a twinge of nerves fluttered. She looked out at the many eyes upon her, forcing her voice to remain steady. "If any of you have concerns, please speak them now. I want to address them directly." A hush fell. After a moment, the same elder who had questioned her earlier cleared his throat. "Very well, Alara. You've proven your dedication to the pack. Let us see how you proceed. My hope is that you'll keep us informed of any further insights or visions." Eamon, standing near the dais, interjected. "We'll intensify Alara's training, focusing on warding spells and advanced detection. Our enemies are cunning, but so are we." Lucas, arms folded at the back, nodded in agreement. Damien cast Alara an encouraging glance. She took a breath. "Thank you all. We can't let fear divide us. The fortress stands strong if we remain united." Ezra placed a hand lightly at her back, signaling the meeting's end. "Damien, Lucas, coordinate extra patrols. Eamon, continue your research. Elders, we'll share updates regularly. We cannot be complacent." The council dispersed with a subdued air, but Alara detected a current of determination in the room, an undercurrent of faith in her. She and Ezra left the hall, hearts pounding from the intensity of leading such a crucial meeting. The sense of responsibility weighed heavily on them both. They found themselves in a quieter courtyard, where the moonlight bathed the fortress stones in silver. Eamon followed, guiding Alara through a series of magical training exercises over the next hours. She practiced summoning shields, weaving protective barriers that shimmered like spun gold in the pale moonlight. Her arms ached from the repeated casting, but her confidence grew each time she successfully held a shield against Eamon's carefully measured blasts of energy. In between spells, Alara leaned on Ezra for support, sweat trickling down her temples. He offered her a water flask and murmured supportive words that warmed her chest. "You're improving so rapidly," he whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "I can practically feel your strength rising through our bond." She caught her breath, mustering a half-smile. "I still worry about losing control, or failing when it matters most." "You won't," he said firmly. "And even if you stumble, I'll be here." The surety in his tone made her heart skip a beat. She gazed up at him, reading the quiet pride in his eyes. A shy flush heated her cheeks, and she found herself leaning in, pressing a soft, grateful kiss to his lips. He returned it gently, ignoring Eamon's polite cough from a short distance away. Later, Eamon ended the lesson, praising Alara's progress. "Rest now," he advised. "Your bond with Ezra is fueling your power, but overexertion invites mistakes. We'll resume tomorrow." Alara nodded, hands trembling from magical fatigue. She felt that odd mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion, the same high that came from pushing one's limits. As Eamon departed, she turned to see Damien and Lucas waiting at the courtyard's edge, quietly debriefing some warriors. She caught fragments of conversation, mention of heightened patrols, suspicious footprints near the eastern gate, and the continuing search for hidden runes. Ezra guided her to a nearby bench, noticing her slight unsteadiness. The courtyard was dim now, with a single torch set in a wall sconce, and the moon nearly overhead. He settled beside her, draping an arm across the bench behind her shoulders. As they sat, the hush of the fortress at night enveloped them like a protective shroud. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly. His voice held a note of concern beneath the affection. Alara shrugged, then let out a weary sigh. "Tired, but better. More confident, maybe. I can actually feel the magic flowing through me in a way I never did before." She glanced at him, picking up on his slight tension. "What about you? You look like you've got something on your mind." He half smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm all right. Just thinking about how each day this threat grows more complex. I can't shake the fear that I'm not doing enough." Her heart clenched. She touched his arm gently. "Ezra, you're leading everyone with courage and clarity. Look at how swiftly you've organized defenses, or how you rally the elders. I see the silver in your hair growing every time you shift, as if your own power is evolving with mine." He turned his face away slightly, as if embarrassed. "I feel strong, physically. My senses are sharper. But inside, I wonder if it's enough to protect you, protect us all, from whatever is brewing." She reached for his chin, guiding his gaze back to her. "You're not alone in this. Our bond is mutual. I'm learning to protect you too." Her voice quivered with earnest resolve. "Don't hide your doubts from me. Let me share them. That's what it means to be mates, right?" He let out a slow breath, leaning into her touch. "I can't lose you," he said, nearly a whisper. "If they severed our bond, if something happened to you." She placed a finger over his lips, her heart aching at the raw fear in his voice. "We can't think like that. We face it together. That's how we'll stay strong." A moment of silence hung, laden with unspoken emotion. Then she gathered her courage and leaned in, kissing him with deliberate passion. It wasn't the tentative gesture of her old shyness. It was a statement of her growing confidence. He inhaled sharply, surprise flickering in his eyes before he wrapped his arms around her, returning the kiss in full. When they parted, both were breathless. The night air felt charged, and Alara saw in his gaze a reflection of her own rising boldness. She blushed, but didn't look away. "I meant that," she said quietly. "I want to be strong for you, just as you are for me." He brushed a thumb over her reddened cheek. "You are," he murmured, voice thick with affection. "Every day, you amaze me." They lingered, exchanging light touches and soft words, the fortress's tensions momentarily distant. Eventually, the crisp night air reminded them that rest was crucial. Together, they walked back inside, guided by flickering torches. She allowed him to escort her to their shared chambers, a comforting routine in the midst of chaos. Before the first rays of dawn, they woke to a new jolt of alarm echoing through the corridors, raised voices and pounding footsteps. Alara bolted upright, her pulse already hammering. She felt an undercurrent of dread twist in her gut, an almost tangible sense that something magical was amiss. In the bed's dim candlelight, she looked to Ezra, who wore the same anxious expression, then hastily dressed to investigate. They found Damien and Lucas in a corridor near the western wing, along with a cluster of guards. The men stood around a trembling fortress servant, a young man named Martin, who was on his knees, head in his hands. Alara's heightened senses flared as soon as she saw him. A sinister aura surrounded him, like tendrils of shadow coiling about his spirit. Ezra stepped forward, voice firm. "What happened here?" Damien exchanged a grim glance with Lucas. Martin was caught trying to sabotage the main storeroom's supports. He acted like he was in a trance. When the guards confronted him, he attacked them with a small knife, babbling about runes and orders in his head. Alara's heart pounded. She sank to a crouch beside Martin, who clutched the floor, muttering incoherently about a voice commanding him to bring down the fortress from within. His eyes were red-rimmed, terror etched into every line of his face. "Stay back," a guard said warily. "He nearly stabbed 2 of us. He's no longer himself." Ezra knelt on Martin's other side. "Let Alara see if she can sense anything." His voice carried a quiet authority, though she felt the tension thrumming in him. Alara inhaled, calling to Asina. She reached out mentally, letting her magic probe the haze around Martin's mind. Instantly, she felt a malignant presence weaving through his consciousness, a subtle enchantment laced with compulsion. Her stomach twisted with revulsion. She forced calm, focusing on unraveling it. Gradually, she visualized golden threads of her own energy forming a barrier, pushing back the dark enchantment that had anchored itself to the young man's thoughts. With a ragged gasp, Martin slumped. His eyes fluttered, then blinked as though seeing the corridor for the first time. "What? He stared at the knife in his trembling hand, horror crossing his features. What have I done?" Alara exhaled shakily, sweat beading on her brow. "It's not entirely your fault. You were influenced by a spell designed to make you sabotage the fortress." She rose unsteadily, and Ezra steadied her with a hand at her elbow. Damien let out a tense breath. "So the enemy truly is inside our walls, or at least they have ways to manipulate people from afar." Lucas's face was grim. "We'll need to interrogate Martin. He may have fragments of instructions that can lead us to more traitors or runic triggers." Ezra stood, helping Alara upright. He caught Damien's eye. "Restrain him gently. He's a victim in this, but keep him under guard while we sort out the magical residue." Damien and 2 guards led Martin away, who muttered apologies, tears streaking his cheeks at the realization of his actions. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, tension carved into his posture. "If they can turn even loyal servants against us, no one is safe." Alara's heart clenched. The infiltration was deeper than she imagined. She looked at Ezra, whose jaw was set in a grim line, silver in his hair catching the torchlight. "We must act quickly," he said. "This can't continue." They summoned Eamon to a nearby room where he swiftly confirmed the presence of a dark enchantment that had nearly consumed Martin's mind. Alara described how she broke the connection, concluding that the manipulation was likely an extension of the same runic magic they'd been encountering. Eamon's face paled at the implications. Ezra, voice laced with anger, demanded answers from Martin in a hastily arranged interrogation. The young man, still shaking from the mental violation, stammered through tears. He recalled hearing a voice in his head for days, urging him to sabotage beams and supports near storerooms to sow confusion, even cause collapses. He had no memory of how it first crept into his mind, only that it grew more insistent with each passing day. Did the voice mention any name? Alara asked quietly, her heart pounding. She felt Ezra's protective hand rest on her shoulder. Martin closed his eyes, wincing as though in pain. I'm not certain. Sometimes it sounded like a man's voice, other times like a whisper that wasn't fully human, but there was a name I heard once in a dream. Orith. Yes, Orith. It repeated that name in my nightmares. Eamon drew in a sharp breath and Alara's stomach clenched. She had never heard of Orith, but the name carried an ominous weight, like an echo from a distant, cursed place. Damien jotted notes, lips pressed into a thin line. Ezra's expression turned steely. Orith. We need to find out who or what that is. Could it be the sorcerer behind these runes? Martin shook his head, helpless. I know nothing else. I swear I never wanted to betray the fortress. I was proud to serve here. Ezra signaled for the guards to escort Martin to a secure but comfortable chamber, promising that once they verified he was free of enchantment, he'd be treated fairly. The door closed, and Alara found herself in a small circle with Eamon, Ezra, Damien, and Lucas. The tension felt suffocating. Eamon rubbed his temples. Orith. A rogue sorcerer, perhaps. The name doesn't ring a bell from my studies, but it's possible it's a pseudonym or a name from an obscure sect. We must investigate thoroughly. Damien exhaled. This is bigger than we anticipated. If they're embedding their influence in loyal men like Martin, we could have more hidden threats. Lucas nodded, eyes grim. We should question every suspicious occurrence from the last few weeks, see if others have been hearing voices. We'll rotate watchers among the pack to spot unusual behavior. Ezra's gaze flicked to Alara. She felt his worry. We also have to consider Alara's safety, he said. If this Orith or whoever orchestrated it learns that Martin's infiltration failed, they might escalate further. Alara stood taller, refusing to waver. I won't hide. We have to confront this head-on. My powers are still growing. Maybe I can do more than defend. Maybe I can track them. Ezra hesitated, torn between his protective instinct and the necessity of her involvement. Finally, he nodded. We'll proceed carefully. But yes, your strength might be our best chance to take the fight to them. Eamon, too, offered a terse nod. I'll help you refine your aura detection. If Orith tries more manipulations, we may sense them in time to intervene. Damien and Lucas agreed to tighten fortress security further, planning to investigate any staff or warrior who showed the slightest sign of magical tampering. A feeling of both dread and resolve settled among them as they parted ways, each burdened with new tasks. Alara lingered beside Ezra, her mind spinning with the name Orith and the terrible notion that the sorcerer's plan might involve her ancestry or her raw magic in ways she couldn't yet fathom. They returned to their chamber, the dawn sky just beginning to lighten the windows. She felt exhaustion tug at her bones, but adrenaline kept her from lying down. Ezra looked equally fatigued, silver hair tousled, eyes shadowed from stress and lack of sleep. She approached him, placing a hand over his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart. We'll figure this out, she said softly. We have to. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Whatever Orith has planned, we'll face it. No matter how dark the threat, our bond is stronger. She leaned into him, letting her forehead rest against his. I know, but hearing that name, the idea that my past or my lineage might be tied to this, I feel uneasy. He slid his arms around her, warmth flooding her senses. Then we'll discover the truth together. You're not alone. She smiled faintly, touched by his unwavering support. Gently, she rose on her toes, capturing his lips with a kiss that spoke of gratitude and love. He sighed against her mouth, letting the tension momentarily ease in the sweetness of their shared solace. In that fleeting moment, all the fear and doubt melted away, replaced by a certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would stand side by side. A quiet knock at the door pulled them back to reality. They separated, breath ragged. Lucas stood outside, voice subdued as he said, "Apologies, but you'll both want to see this." His tone hinted at yet more urgency. Alara and Ezra exchanged a resolved glance before following Lucas into the hallway. He led them to a small side room near the fortress guard station. There, a battered messenger bag lay on a table, alongside a folded parchment. "One of our scouts found this just outside the northern gate," Lucas explained. "It was left in plain sight, as if whoever placed it wanted us to see it immediately." Ezra frowned, stepping forward. Alara's heart pounded as she recognized the faint tingle of magic emanating from the parchment. Carefully, Ezra unfolded it, scanning the words. His breath caught, and he handed it to Alara. The message contained a single phrase in an elaborate script. "I know your secrets, Alara. Orith is waiting." Her blood ran cold. The script shimmered with faint runic traces as if to underscore the sinister intent. Another direct message, another piece of the puzzle, sent to rattle her, and it succeeded. She swallowed, reading the line again. "They know who I am," she whispered. "They want me to fear them." Ezra's eyes smoldered. "They're stepping up their game. Time for us to do the same." He turned to Lucas. "Rally the men. We'll scour every foot of the northern perimeter and keep watch for more messages." Lucas nodded crisply. "Yes, Alpha, right away." Alara stood frozen, the parchment in her hand feeling heavier by the second. She recalled the traitor's words and the name Orith, the runes shimmering in her memory. The swirl of images from her earlier vision clawed at the edges of her mind. She wondered if Orith had some personal link to her lineage or if it was merely strategic to focus on her. Either way, a storm was brewing beyond the fortress walls, one that threatened everything she held dear. Ezra placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, quiet resolve resonating in his gaze. "We end this," he said, voice like steel. "No matter what shadows they cast, we'll protect our home and each other." She clutched the message, recalling how the entire fortress depended on their unity. The mate bond glowed fiercely inside her, reminding her that she was no longer alone, no longer powerless. Turning to meet Ezra's determined eyes, she felt a rush of fierce devotion flood through her. They shared a silent vow, to stand against the darkness, to uncover this Orith, to break the chain of runic manipulations. And if the enemy dared to rise further, they would discover the fortress's greatest strength dwelled not just in stone walls or armed warriors, but in the unbreakable bond between Alara and Ezra. She drew closer to him, the message clutched in her fist, her heart pounding with an odd mixture of trepidation and conviction. "Together," she murmured, as though it were a protective charm. He nodded, slipping an arm around her waist. "Always," he echoed, voice steady, despite the looming threat. And in that singular moment, beneath the flickering torchlight and the hush of the corridor, they braced themselves for whatever came next. The enemy's name was known now, Orith, and that knowledge would change everything. Neither of them could guess what revelations about Alara's past or what grand designs this rogue sorcerer might unleash. But one thing was clear. The danger was personal, it was intense, and it was closing in. Yet with the fortress gathered behind them, with their bond fused by love and power, they would meet the dark tide head-on. The storm was coming, and they stood at the forefront, determined to face it side by side, heart to heart.